Her Excellency, the President, to the Honorable the House of Assembly. Her Excellency, the President, wishes to inform the Honorable the House of Assembly of the death of the Right Honorable Sir Lloyd Sandiford K.A. JP, former Prime Minister of Barbados, on Monday, 26 June 2023. Signed, President.
Petitions, papers, government notices, private members' notices, notices of questions, reports from select committees, first reading of bills.
Honorable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that the airport. I beg to move the first reading of the Airport Service Charge Amendment Bill 2023.
Make second.
The question is that the aforementioned bill be read the first time. All those honorable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Me think the ayes have it.
Statement by ministers, congratulatory and obituary speeches, personal explanations, motions for leave of absence, oral replies to questions, notice of motion for adjournment of the House on matters of urgent public importance, orders of the day.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move the suspension of Standing Orders 6, 16, 18, 20, 42.5, 43, and 44.
The question is that the aforementioned standing orders be suspended for the remainder of the day's sitting. All those honorable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Me think the ayes have it. The aforementioned standing orders are hereby suspended for the remainder of the day's sitting. Government business is the order of the day.
Order number 4, sir. Leave to withdraw. Leave to withdraw. Order number 4.
Honorable Leader, government business.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move the withdrawal of the resolution to approve, in accordance with Section 5 of the Land Acquisition Act, Cap 2228, the compulsory acquisition of the state of parcels of land situated at Work Hall in the parish of St. Philip in this island for public purpose of regularizing a squatters' housing area. To withdraw.
The question is that the aforementioned resolution be withdrawn. All those honorable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it. The aforementioned resolution is hereby withdrawn.
Order number 9, sir.
Mr. Speaker, I beg that bill be withdrawn.
The question is that order number 9 be withdrawn. All those honorable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it. Order number 9 is hereby withdrawn.
Number 11 on the supplementary order paper, in name of the Honourable Minister of Tourism, to move the second reading of the Airport Service Charge Amendment Bill 2022.
Honourable Member for St. Michael West Central.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, in the budgetary proposals and financial statement of 2023, which was delivered right here in Parliament on March the 14th, the Prime Minister announced that there would be an adjustment to the Air Travel and Tourism Development Fee, otherwise known as the Airport Service Charge, from July 1 of this year until December 14th. The Cabinet, Mr. Speaker, met on June the 22nd and agreed, and therefore, Mr. Speaker, we are here in order to facilitate the amendment to the Airport Service Charge. I must say, Mr. Speaker, that the upfront that this reduction will be in the vicinity of a 43%. In other words, the tax that currently obtained at US $35 will now be reduced to $20 from July 1st, and like I said, until December 14th of this year. Therefore, an amendment would be required in order to effect the change for the fees to be imposed. Mr. Speaker, the reduction in the airport service charge for regional travel is essentially designed to boost travel from within the CARICOM area to Barbados. Many countries, Mr. Speaker, it is widely known that aviation, you see growth and development through aviation, and it's also a sector, Mr. Speaker, that provides a lot of employment for persons, and it is a sector in itself that can ensure robust growth. Therefore, Mr. Speaker, we felt is absolutely necessary, based on the estimates that coming out of IATA, that over $1 billion in related taxes would be paid by airlines to stakeholders annually. We felt that this was an opportunity for us to stimulate the Caribbean travel market. We recognize that we have to stimulate the local market. And why do we have to do this, Mr. Speaker? We would have had pre-COVID LIA that would have brought a lot of passengers to Barbados. We no longer have LIA in the form that we had. It's now effectively been reduced to a very, very small portion of the passengers coming from within the Caribbean to Barbados. And what we felt, notwithstanding that we have to work with the regional airlines to build additional capacity to ensure that we get more arrivals into Barbados, we took this step because we felt confident that a reduction in the airport service charge would stimulate travel within the region and also ensure that we get more arrivals from the Caribbean into Barbados. It is known, Mr. Speaker, that a visitor from the CARICOM area would come to Barbados and spend approximately 6 to 7 days. And if you calculate that based on the room nights and the cost of the room night, let's assume you were paying maybe $150 or less per day. You can imagine the yield that we would earn as a result of the increased traffic to Barbados. So we've taken that decision. We recognize that the CARICOM market is price sensitive. We recognize if we are going to drive traffic to the destination in the absence of having what was LIA in its former form, then we had to take the necessary steps to adjust, to make the adjustments. Mr. Speaker, the government will continue to work in the absence of LIA in its original form, like I said, with a number of Caribbean airlines. We would have gone on record before, Mr. Speaker, and we would have made mention of the fact that Air Antilles and Caribbean Airlines would both contribute more than 37,000 seats to this destination. I'm pleased to say that based on the the load factors coming out of the both regional carriers, I am pleased that we are seeing an increase in the number of arrivals from within CARICOM. And for some destinations, it is no longer a requirement for CARICOM nationals to have to fly to Miami to then to come on to Barbados or go to any other destination. We're doing it incrementally. We're doing it on the basis that we have to build out the Caribbean market. I think it is widely known, Mr. Speaker, that the Caribbean market is the 4th largest market for Barbados' arrivals. And therefore, we have to continually think about initiatives that will stimulate the market. And the adjustment to the airport service charge is but one such initiative that we have put in place. Mr. Speaker, I'm also going to make the point that when you look and see what is happening with aviation generally, and what happened to us pre-COVID and what has happened to us post-COVID, the urgency that we've attached to this particular matter has to be one that is focused on deliverables, and we are confident. Mr. Speaker, if you go back and we look at the pre-COVID numbers, arrival numbers from the CARICOM area, from the Caribbean, we are at April, trending January to April, we are trending at 72% of what we had in a pre-COVID environment, in particular in 2019. What we're seeing year on year is that there are substantial adjustments to the arrivals coming out of the region because we have worked with Air Antilles, like I said, and Inter-Caribbean. In particular, Inter-Caribbean has increased the number of aircraft flying to Barbados. They have now expanded their route network, and now we have an opportunity to continue to work with Inter-Caribbean and Air Antilles in order to build out. I may also add, Mr. Speaker, that Virgin Atlantic, they have tag flights, and by a tag flight, I refer to a flight that lands from, say, UK, London, Heathrow, arrives in Barbados, then moves on to St. Vincent or Grenada. That's known as a tag flight. And as a result of the government agreeing to that mechanism, we are beginning to see increased traffic coming out of those two destinations in particular, where Virgin Atlantic would crisscross the region. So we are beginning to see the numbers growing. It is very encouraging. I am pleased with the progress, but we're not back to the 2019 levels. But I'm confident, Mr. Speaker, that we will get there, especially as it relates to the Caribbean travel market. Mr. Speaker, I have to be frank with the country and say that, as we all know, air travel is a dynamic activity with changes possible at a moment's notice, over which we have no control and for which we have to be prepared. And we have to be equipped to respond quickly, Mr. Speaker, and positively. We don't own any airlines. We don't own any aircraft. And therefore, the aviation sector that we had in a post-COVID environment is not the same that we had that occurred over the pre-pandemic stage. The airline industry, Mr. Speaker, because of the debt that airlines had to incur during the COVID period, has now caused them to have to skillfully manage their resources to reduce their debt burden and to set them on a road to profitability. This is where, Mr. Speaker, aviation economics, and perhaps, Mr. Speaker, you could speak to this better than I can, being an economist and a person who's trained in economics yourself. This is a highly specialized area, and executives of airline companies will tell you, and with whom my team and I met, and we meet often with them, that and when we engage them face to face, Mr. Speaker, they've made it quite clear that profitability is the key business driver, and that airlines will only service those routes that are profitable to them. Mr. Speaker, we've heard it over and over again, like I said, in face-to-face meetings. The industry is also plagued, Mr. Speaker, with a delay in delivery of new aircraft, and in the from Boeing and Airbus, and that is a fact. They also have a situation where the manufacturers not only having challenges with their supply chain, but they also have challenges in getting new aircraft delivered to companies. The issue of the aviation sector having to retire aircraft during the pandemic. There are some who retired, in particular BA, for example, that retired 33 747s. You had other entities that said these aircraft are definitely too inefficient to operate. And therefore, they had to take a conscious decision during the pandemic to effectively retool. And part of the retooling came in the form of the retirement of several aircraft. In fact, there's a joke in the aviation, Mr. Speaker, that there were some airline companies that sent the once referred to inefficient aircraft to the desert to park them. And when they were faced with their challenges in terms of the resurgence in business and business travel, they were faced, some of them who didn't cannibalize, were faced to go back to the desert in order to get some of the aircraft. So, Mr. Speaker, the airline industry is strictly about profitability. They're focusing on routes that will be highly profitable for them. But at the same time, Mr. Speaker, the country needs to understand that there's also an issue with human resources within the sector. At the CTO conference earlier this year in New York, mention was made that in this year alone, 2023, there's a demand for over 10,000 pilots. And every year thereafter from next year, the demand is going to be about for 5,000. In fact, Mr. Speaker, if you witness what is happening in the United States of America, airlines that were once flourishing in a pre-pandemic era, they are now often, sometimes down 20% on their departures compared to pre-COVID. It is because they don't have the equipment to service the routes, and therefore the demand that is there will continue to drive the price of air travel up. And we are seeing it, we've seen it in the United States, and obviously we are seeing it globally. So I thought, Mr. Speaker, that I would put that in its proper context, because we have to understand the environment in which we are operating. We have to understand it. It is a difficult task, Mr. Speaker. It is becoming even more critical, and therefore we have to do what we have to do, not only to drive traffic to Barbados, but to ensure that the loads are absolutely higher than expected. The Barbados Tourism Marketing Inc., Mr. Speaker, they are working assiduously with the airlines in all of the markets to ensure that we have increased load factors and that we do not suffer any attendant loss as a result. The competition is fierce for airlines. It is no longer a situation where you want to come and give somebody an MRG or a serious incentive to come. The airline industry is now focused on routes that are very profitable. And I'm saying that we're going to have to make sure we continue to do what we're doing, continue to build relationships with the airline executives in order to ensure that we have our fair share of aircraft and airlines coming to Barbados. Mr. Speaker, I'm also pleased to announce that arrivals are improving at an encouraging rate. We're not yet back to 2019, and we know why. Because we took a decision as a country back in September of 2022 to fully relax our protocols, and therefore there were some scheduling challenges that operators were faced with and the airlines were faced with. But we are beginning to see the resurgence, and we are confident that we will get back to that 2019 period. Mr. Speaker, only last week I happened to be on the road, and I've spent some time in the UK, spent some time in Ireland and Scotland, as well as in the United States, having discussions with our travel and trade partners, including tour operators, travel agents, and of course the airline sector, to understand what we are faced with and to ensure that we have the necessary prescriptive response to ensure we continue to drive business to Barbados. Mr. Speaker, we were in Ireland. We met with Aer Lingus. As you know, Mr. Speaker, Aer Lingus had commenced a direct service to Barbados in 2021. That was in the height of the Omicron, and therefore, and they had 3 flights a week. It didn't perform as well as it should have because, like I said, we were in the throes of the Omicron. The following year, Mr. Speaker, the service returned, and it was a 3 times a week service to Barbados. It is a key route for visitors coming to Barbados because out of Manchester, for persons traveling out of Scotland, persons traveling out of northern UK. We had the meeting with them. We discussed how we can best employ strategies and tactics in order to improve the overall performance for this coming winter season. The Manchester season, as we know, is seasonal, but the possibility of establishing a direct service is what we went to discuss with them as well from another destination, and discussions are ongoing to see how best we can improve those services. Overall, I can say that the service is performing reasonably well and that we have a duty to ensure now that we increase the load factor. I think the load factor coming out of that market for last winter was approximately 70%. The route clearly has to improve, Mr. Speaker, because make no bones about it. Airlines will point their aircraft to routes that are profitable, and therefore we are going to increase the performance of that market. We are going to increase the marketing support required in that market, the Manchester market. We are obviously working very closely with the Aer Lingus marketing team, that is the BTMI UK and European office, to ensure that the winter schedule remains unaffected. And I can also confirm, Mr. Speaker, that this winter, 2023-24, it will be extended through May the 10th of this year, increasing capacity by 8%. But I have to put it in its proper context, Mr. Speaker, because we have to know what we're doing and what we are faced with in Barbados, because, like I said, we don't own any airlines, we don't own any aircraft. Mr. Speaker, whilst we were there, I also took an opportunity to have a reception with strategic industry partners. We had more than 40 distinguished persons attending from the Irish market, including Irish media, Irish stakeholders, which was held at the Westbury Hotel. We did that, Mr. Speaker, because once we're in market, we have to showcase what we have to offer. You have to sit down and talk to your travel partners because you're building up relationships with these people. And those went very well. There's a lot of demand in that Irish market for Barbados. We all know that Barbados has a very close business relationship with the Irish. Of course, if you look on the west coast of Barbados, you know the familiar Sand Lane Hotel. Mr. Speaker, in Scotland, we also took an opportunity to meet with the Scottish Passenger Agents Association. There were over 300 agents at that function. It was an opportunity. It was a very luxurious event, but it was also an opportunity to attract the who's of who's within the Scottish travel trade in order to promote Barbados. We went to the UK, Mr. Speaker, and the United Kingdom. We met with several travel trade operators. The operators spoke with that we spoke to were very optimistic about Barbados. These are obviously high-end operators that we deal with in the UK. They told us that Barbados is a top-performing destination, Mr. Speaker, and going forward for the winter, it is clear that we do not have anything to worry about from that side of the market. We also met, Mr. Speaker, with British Airways. And the point here, Mr. Speaker, is very pleasing because BA told us, and it told the delegation, that the Barbados route has performed exceptionally well for the first 6 months of this year. And when they look at the 6 months forecast to the end of the year, that they are very, very positive about the future. BA expects to operate 12 flights per week, daily from Heathrow, and of course 5 coming out of Gatwick during the coming winter season. They also inform us, that is British Airways, inform us that they will be deploying a larger 777-300 aircraft. That will give us an additional 76 seats in the cabin class, what we call business class. They will also have, of course, the 8 first class seats, and we will have another 40 World Traveler Plus and 130 World Traveler, which is the economy class program. The BA Worldwide also told us that they're still operating at 80% of their departure capacity when compared to pre-pandemic. But the good thing about it is that Barbados will continue to be protected. They've made it clear that Barbados is a good route, it's performing well, and therefore they will continue to protect that route. Mr. Speaker, I should also let the country know that it is no secret when we hear people talking about flights being suspended, that BA had to, in a bid to become more efficient, they had to suspend flights to Bangkok in Thailand, Kuala Lumpur in Malaysia, and they also had to do the same thing in Abu Dhabi in the UAE. And those were suspended. But fortunately for Barbados, we will continue to have our services year-round for not only for the winter, but we will have our services for the summer. We also had an opportunity to meet with BA Holidays, and BA Holidays told us that their bookings were up on last year. What we've witnessed is that there's a shift to the all-inclusive market, and I believe that that is in part due to the fact that the Caribbean is facing some stiff competition from other all-inclusives within Europe. But thankfully, their business is improving. I can say, Mr. Speaker, that BA continues to have very strong load factors coming out to Heathrow as well. As I indicated, they have protected the Barbados route. They will have tactical cancellations as they have done in the past. But thankfully, tactical cancellations are not only for the Caribbean. They are also having tactical cancellations within the United States out of major cities like Miami and Los Angeles. But the reality is that this route has been protected. We have no planned reduction in airlift and services during the forthcoming winter season. And the good news, as I indicated, that whereas before when you travel on BA, you will have what I call the love seats where you have to step over. You will no longer have those, Mr. Speaker. So if you're journeying to London, Mr. Speaker, you would have an opportunity to be seated in a front-facing seat without having to step over anybody. So, and that's because they're deploying the larger 777-300 aircraft, as I mentioned. I must also inform you, Mr. Speaker, that next year, BA will be celebrating its 70th anniversary of flying of service to Barbados. It is going to be a memorable event for the airline and Barbados as a partner. And we are going to partner with them, Mr. Speaker, because 70 years is not 70 days. And for a carrier that has helped us and has done so much for Barbados and continues to protect us in this space, we are going to ensure that the marketing surrounding the 70th anniversary would give Barbados the necessary exposure in the United Kingdom and Europe, but also that we would have an opportunity to drive additional business to this market. Mr. Speaker, and you know, sometimes when you talk about these things, you're some people who will tell you that this Caribbean country is doing better than Barbados, and sometimes I marvel, Mr. Speaker, because it is clear to me that they're not following aviation. Mr. Speaker, I really would want to challenge anybody to name any country in the Eastern Caribbean where that enjoys greater airlift than Barbados out of the United Kingdom. Mr. Speaker, it's a fact. Mr. Speaker, we have daily flights coming into Barbados. In the winter, we do extremely well, and we've been doing that for many years. But when I hear people talking about the fact that this country is doing better than us, and the issue, Mr. Speaker, is very clear. BA, when they fly to Barbados, don't have any tag flights. And if you have at least 12 flights coming from one airport and 5 from Gatwick, Mr. Speaker, what does that tell you? But when you look at some of the other Caribbean countries, not to poo-poo what they're doing, because I'm not about that, is about a comparative analysis that whereas Barbados has flights from London daily, Mr. Speaker, and during the winter we have sometimes twice daily from one carrier alone, Mr. Speaker. It tells the story of where we are and where we want to go. And these, like I said, are direct, non-stop flights. Mr. Speaker, we also had the opportunity to meet with United States Airlines. We met with United Airlines on the 26th of June. The leadership told us that they were very pleased with the performance of the Newark and the Dulles route, in particular out of Washington Dulles. The performance continues to exceed the performance expectations that they had for that market, which contributed, Mr. Speaker, to a positive meeting. The Newark flight, Mr. Speaker, I can tell you, returns 2 months early. It will commence in September of this year. September 30th, to be exact, will be the start date. The Washington Dulles service, Mr. Speaker, will also will start 1 month early with an October 30th start date. The Newark service, Mr. Speaker, I'm pleased to announce, will be a daily service during the peak period, which is the peak winter season, and that will be in Q1 of next year, with an opportunity, of course, for an extension of service. Both Newark and Washington will now be operating year-round, increasing airlift into Barbados and by extension, increasing seat capacity from the United States of America. We've also, Mr. Speaker, put some additional route options to United Airlines and have asked them to consider, for example, the Chicago route, because we have to build out the Midwest and we have to build out additional routes. We are hopeful that once we provide them with the business case, as they have done in respect of Washington Dulles and also Newark, that too could potentially be added to the table. But effectively, Mr. Speaker, when you're on these trips, you have to be shopping for additional airlift, because we can't be planning for next winter season. We have to be planning for the forthcoming seasons all the way down year on year, and therefore we are shopping around for new airlift. We also met, Mr. Speaker, with the executives at Southwest. We focus on what we have to offer, the new investments coming to Barbados in respect of the hotel sector and the accommodation sector. And we also focus our discussion on building out additional. Of course, like I said, the aviation sector is challenged with the lack of delivery of aircraft, timely delivery, and therefore it will take some time. But we have entered the market very early to ensure we have discussions, because, Mr. Speaker, we would like to be the first destination within the Eastern Caribbean that can get a Southwest coming here. And therefore, we will continue to do what we have to do to make the proper business case for Barbados as a destination for these airlines to fly to. And of course, we're asking them for additional services. The reality for us, Mr. Speaker, is that we, on the same day, and it was I must tell you, Mr. Speaker, it was very, very hot in Dallas. By the time I got on my vehicle, I tell you, the heat struck me like heat like I never felt before, Mr. Speaker. And having come from the cold to the heat, it was indeed an experience. But we met with American Airlines senior leadership. They once again reinforced their commitment to Barbados. The third daily flight from Miami will commence on August the 15th of this year to September the 5th. Obviously, Mr. Speaker, when you look at the pattern after crop over, they felt obviously there's a need for additional, based on the demand that they're seeing for additional aircraft. They've put additional aircraft in that slot, August 15th to September the 5th of this year, recognizing that we have, again, I will reiterate that the challenge for us is that the airlines do not have all the planes that they would have ideally had prior to the pandemic, and because they had to retire aircraft, the challenge for them is now trying to get as many aircraft to destinations. I can also tell you, Mr. Speaker, that coming out of that meeting, the daily service out of Charlotte will be commencing on December the 7th of this year through the end of April next year, with a strong possibility of an extension given the current trajectory of the strong performance that they have seen in Barbados as a destination. Of course, we're going to have to continue to have the discussion and the dialogue with these airline executives. But I'm also, Mr. Speaker, pleased to announce that notwithstanding the challenges with the lack of planes available for key airlines, that American Airlines, when we got to the meeting, told us that they will have a third service coming into Barbados. Now, this is from the coming winter season. So I'm pleased to announce, Mr. Speaker, the addition of a third service from Miami to Barbados, commencing this year, November of this year, and that service will continue through March 2024 with the possibility of an extension. So in other words, Mr. Speaker, every Saturday during the winter, you will have 3 American Airlines flights on a Saturday coming from Miami to Barbados. Again, Mr. Speaker, that was critically reviewed and looked at, and the case was presented to ensure that we expand airlift. We also presented a business case to American for additional gateways into Barbados, and I'm sure that the team, BTMI team in the United States market, will continue the engagement with the U.S. airlines as we seek to build out the business case. We met with Spirit as well, Mr. Speaker, again on the shopping list to try to get additional flights into Barbados. Mr. Speaker, when I look at the data coming out of the Grant Williams International Airport, and when you look at the arrivals, Mr. Speaker, there's no doubt in my mind that the load factors are very strong, very, very strong coming into Barbados. In fact, Mr. Speaker, I think it is well known that oftentimes it is very difficult to get on a flight, to get out of Barbados, to go sometimes to USA, Miami in particular, and or the UK. And certainly when I'm traveling, Mr. Speaker, I'm seeing the load on the plane. And when you see it, sometimes you have no seats available in business, you have no seats sometimes available in economy, and even the flight attendants will tell you that Barbados is doing well in terms of the load factors. Mr. Speaker, if there is such demand for the market, and as we've seen it, it is now reaching a point where the airlines have recognized that, and they're adjusting their strategy to ensure we get additional airlift into Barbados. That is why we took the strategic decision to go and meet with the airlines, obviously to maintain partnerships and relationships, but at the same time, Mr. Speaker, to devise strategies to ensure and present business cases for us to get additional airlift into Barbados. So, Mr. Speaker, if the airlift and the load factors coming into Barbados, if the load factor is so solid, they must be staying somewhere, Mr. Speaker. They're not staying at your house, Mr. Speaker, or my house. So they must be staying somewhere. So the issue for us, even on the heels of a very strong and what I consider to be a very strong winter performance, we're beginning to see the demand continuing through what we call summer. And summer is basically defined by IATA from May through to October. So the accommodation sector is also benefiting. I know that sometimes we will hear a criticism from some quarters that maybe this hotel isn't full or we can't fill hotels, but there's the accommodation sector. And as I indicated at a meeting not so long ago, they have to really monitor where the guests are going. We recognize that the villa market is readily available, and some people stay in villas, some will stay in hotels, some people will also stay in what we know as the Airbnb type accommodation. But the good news is that the load factors into Barbados continue to be very solid. I would say that the accommodation sector obviously will have to probably start the process of updating from a manual, some of them updating from a manual to automated system to feed into the airlines as well. And I also think, Mr. Speaker, that the time has come where perhaps they should look at some models, for example, a similar model as obtained by Sanders, where you have like a unique vacation, you can buy the seats on the aircraft, you can sell the package tied with the seats, and ensure that they also get them to Barbados as a destination. So I think all in all, I'm very pleased with how those meetings went. in respect of the commitment from the manager and what we call legacy carriers, carriers that have been coming here for a long period of time, that they too would have an opportunity not only to maintain profitability in this route, but bring the visitors to Barbados that we saw that we need. Mr. Speaker, I think it's important as well that I give a brief update on the performance to January. From January of this year to April, our arrivals were at 75% of the 2019 levels. In 2019, we had 273,000 arrivals. In 2023, 204,000. If we look, for example, for the same period, January to April of this year, 2023, compared to last year, what we've noticed is that there was a 75% increase. Like I indicated, we would fully relax our protocols in September, latter part of September, and therefore we are beginning to see some growth in the area. So the numbers are growing. I'm very encouraged. They're looking very fruitful, and I'm sure that we will do what we have to do in order to drive additional business to this market. In respect of summer, Mr. Speaker, there is a summer program. The BTMI and the BHTA and other accommodation sector members would have met. They would have discussed plans for the summer. I am pleased that that program is well on its way. We know, as I said, the legacy carriers are full. Forward bookings, Mr. Speaker, forward bookings compared to last year are up, Mr. Speaker. And that is always the barometer. If you look at the forward bookings essentially is where you take information out of the aviation of the airline systems to see how many seats they have sold in a particular destination. So the forward bookings have increased, Mr. Speaker. And I'm also pleased to announce that effective August 8th to October the 15th, we will have a travel credit, a $200 travel credit, reimbursable at all Barbados Product Tourism Authority registered accommodations, Mr. Speaker. And the reason why we're doing this initiative is because we want to drive additional business to Barbados during the summer. It is a very exciting program. We believe it will obviously increase arrivals to Barbados, and I'm sure that the BTMI will continue to do what they do best in terms of marketing that program to the satisfaction of both persons, both entities. Mr. Speaker, the other issue for us is the whole issue of charters. You would have heard, Mr. Speaker, the BTMI, through its chair, would have released a statement indicating that we are going to have some charters coming into Barbados. Those charters will be coming out of Fort Lauderdale. There will be a scheduled service for that defined period, August, like I said, through to September. It's again designed to drive, to provide additional seats for persons who wish to come to Barbados for our activities, including crop over. It's coming out of Fort Lauderdale, which is a market familiar to Barbadians and also to U.S.-based travelers, and certainly to members of the diaspora who would wish to come home. The price point is very attractive. It is below what we are currently getting, and therefore I believe that opportunity that we have negotiated would give us additional arrivals into Barbados, and at the same time allow persons who wish to come home from the diaspora to do so at a reasonably, very, very reasonably priced ticket. Mr. Speaker, the issue regarding charters is something we're going to have to look at going forward. We're going to have to look and see, for example, where there is demand, where we have seasonal events like crop over and food and rum, and when we have other events. For us, the decision has been taken that they will start earlier. Go into the market, get the charters, sell them to the diaspora, sell them to Barbadians, sell them to visitors, in order for them to come home for crop over and not having to pay sometimes the rate. But it also does, Mr. Speaker, that it would free up the other legacy carriers to provide seats for persons who are desirous of visiting Barbados and staying in any of our accommodation types. And Mr. Speaker, that move, I believe, will also yield increased results in the next year. But we are starting early. We are planning now for next year in order to drive that charter business, which should be incremental business to the destination. Mr. Speaker, I've also I will go back for a second, Mr. Speaker. In about April, after sea trade, the BTMI undertook a visit to Panama. And as a result of that visit, Mr. Speaker, I led the delegation. And when we went to Panama, the core objective, when I met with the Chief Executive Officer of Copa Airlines, and as we know, Copa has done very well on this route. Load factors, again, plane is almost full every day when it comes into Barbados on the assigned days. We went into the Chief Executive Officer's office with our delegation. And we made the case, Mr. Speaker, for additional airlift into Barbados. Mr. Speaker, and we were told if Boeing had delivered, if they were on target with their deliveries, perhaps we would have gotten more than we asked for, Mr. Speaker. But, Mr. Speaker, I am pleased to announce that the third Copa flight will be arriving in Barbados on Friday, July the 7th, Mr. Speaker. And it is as a direct result of the engagement that I had with the CEO of Copa in Panama that led, along with the team members, that allowed us to have now a third flight. What does this do, Mr. Speaker? Again, there were 2 flights a week. This will now be the third. Again, increased airlift, increased seats coming to Barbados. And as I said before, the market, the Panama, the Copa route, Barbados-Panama is doing very, very well. So I am pleased that is going well. But, Mr. Speaker, before I conclude, I think it is necessary that I create a state of national awareness as it relates to the aviation sector. I've said before, Mr. Speaker, that the airlines are directing the aircraft to the most, or as they say, pointing them to the most profitable routes. Our goal, Mr. Speaker, must be to defend and protect airlift in the first position. The second position, Mr. Speaker, is for us to grow airlift. And by some of the measures that I would have referred to undertaken by the Ministry of Tourism and the Barbados Tourism Marketing, Inc., you can see that we have a strategic plan. We are meeting with airlines. As I refer to it, we're shopping the airlines, looking for new routes. So we have a growth plan in place to drive additional traffic to the market. We have to execute our airlift growth strategy, and that's what we're working on. It is very difficult considering the environment we have to operate in. Airlines in the United States, they tell us that the departures are down 20% on COVID, pre-COVID, and therefore that says a lot. Some airlines, Mr. Speaker, have scrapped their planes, the inefficient planes, because it doesn't make financial sense. It's no longer profitable for those, and as a result of the scrapping of planes, it therefore meant that you have more demand, but you don't have the supply of aircraft in order to put them on this route. And, Mr. Speaker, the country must also be aware that there are certain human resources challenges now confronting the aviation sector. The shortage of pilots, but they're getting through now with the cabin crew. At one stage, earlier this year, there was a serious shortage of cabin crew, Mr. Speaker. And once they can get past the human resources issue with the pilots and the other technical staff and the engineering teams, Mr. Speaker, I'm confident that we can start to see and realize some significant benefits in this region. Mr. Speaker, I thought I would spend the time this morning even to expand on the initiatives that we are undertaking, because true to my style, Mr. Speaker, I believe in transparency. I believe you have to update the country. You have to let the country know where you're traveling, and I'm not going on any jaunt, because a lot of hard work, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, you know I like to canvass too. And this job, Mr. Speaker, sometimes cut into my canvassing time at a rate I've never hitherto experienced, sir. I've never seen it like this. But we have to do it. It's the nature of the job. We have to go out. We have to make a pitch. And it's dovetailing nicely. We've already announced during the estimates our strategy to expand into the Latin American market, and we are quoting the Gulf states. We are beginning to see the dividends being paid from the Latin American market would increase the third corporate airline service that we're going to receive on this Friday, and that's a very important signal. There are other airlines that we have to meet with within the Latin American region in order to build that out. But I believe we are on the correct course. And of course, Mr. Speaker, once I do as much as I can do, sir, and Mr. Speaker, I always commit not only to the constituents of St. Michael West Central, but to the people of Barbados that I will go to work, and I will work very, very hard on their behalf. And Mr. Speaker, and I can tell you, in tourism, those who served before me had the work cut out, Mr. Speaker, and I can say so for a very short 8 months on the job. It is it's taxing, it is tough, Mr. Speaker, but the country, the economy depends on it, Mr. Speaker, and we are not going to let this country down. We're not going to let the workers in the tourism sector down, and we will continue to do what we have to do in order to build out the tourism sector to be a very vibrant and sustained sector. Mr. Speaker, I don't want to go on, but I felt that it was necessary to give a detailed report as we obviously amend the airport service charge bill. But I give you, Mr. Speaker, and the country my commitment that as long as I am Minister of Tourism and International Transport, I will come to work, I will go to work, and I will work very hard on behalf of this country and on behalf of the people who depend on tourism, because this tourism represents a significant pillar of our GDP. And with those few words, Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that this bill be read a second time.
Honourable Member for Christchurch East Central.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And I want to commend the Honourable Member for St. Michael West Central for his very clear presentation on what effectively, sir, for some might just seem to be a basic tax matter. But given all that we have gone through, sir, in the last 3 years, I think we can appreciate that the importance of all of the activities within tourism, sir, all of the activities within tourism rely almost exclusively on getting people to Barbados. And during the pandemic, sir, I think, which none of us could anticipate, sir, the cessation of global air travel. We would appreciate that unless we are able to get people here safely, economically, then the rest of those services, of which there are many, sir, this country would not be able to effectively, sir, pay its bills. And I think that as we contemplate a renewed future within the civil aviation space, sir, which really is an avenue that I know the Honourable Member himself is on the other side of the portfolio in terms of international transport, and building out that sector is really going to be a key plank, sir, in relation to how we can further diversify the economy, but certainly, sir, within the context of being able to provide opportunities for young people. I think there is real scope for how we rethink, how we provision for not just tourism, but how we provision for international transport, and to recognize, sir, that there are opportunities that Barbados can leverage, given the vast network, as the Honourable Member indicated, in terms of what already exists, to allow not just persons to expand within the civil aviation space, but equally, sir, to leverage that airlift as part of our export thrust in order to help grow the economy. Now, sir, today being July 4th, and typically for most people in the world, July 4th has a specific connotation. But today, sir, 50 years ago, the Prime Ministers of Barbados, Jamaica, Guyana, and Trinidad, sir, signed an agreement, sir, which will establish CARICOM, which would come into effect, sir, August 1st of 1973. So today being 50 years on, sir, we'll be here debating this specific amendment. And as you know, the Honourable Prime Minister is in Trinidad, sir, right now, celebrating as part of those 50th the 50th anniversary of CARICOM. It is instructive that we are here today debating this element with respect to support, Barbados' government support for regional travel, coming out of some clear issues that the honourable member raised as a result of the pandemic, and therefore wanting to ensure that we, as Barbados, sir, given our very, very, very strong commitment to regionalism, can put together this program to help re-energize regional travel. And I think the honourable member was quite clear, sir, that whilst there are no aircraft being manufactured in Barbados or the region for that matter, sir, and given the size of our respective markets, it is important for us to recognize that regional travel is important not just for leisure, and obviously crop over is in full swing, and I would like every CARICOM citizen to come and enjoy crop over this year if you can. So all of the airlift that the honourable member has spoken about, I want you to go online, sir, and find your way to Barbados to help celebrate the Swedish Summer Festival, sir, and it certainly has my full support. Barbados will welcome all visitors, but our CARICOM brothers and sisters in particular, sir, we welcome to fully embrace the Crop Over Festival. And it is something that, as we look to close the seasonality gap, sir, because one of the things that the honourable member mentioned with respect to expansion of the beyond the traditional markets, Latin America, Africa, the Middle East, and the like, sir, is really to help us to be able to remove the seasonal impact, or the seasonal effect, I should say, because the traditional visitors from the Northern Hemisphere, they come in their droves, sir, during their winter season. It's now summer in the north, it's winter in the south, and we clearly need to ensure that COVID notwithstanding, the issues of airline and airlift notwithstanding, that Barbados develops a very strong and clear strategy with respect to being able to open up not just airlift, but trade both ways in order to ensure that we can close that gap. And I think that given government's thrust already to engage in Africa, our missions that we open in Panama and Brazil and others that are being contemplated, sir, that we hope that that approach will allow us both from a diplomatic, but equally, sir, from a trade perspective, we'll see the opportunities arising therefrom, such that with respect to the various air services agreements, that we can have traffic moving from south to north to Barbados, and therefore I know that the ministry is working to resolve a number of those matters, which, as the honourable member said, is really not just about for the next so-called winter season, but you're planning to ensure that next summer and the summer thereafter and the summer thereafter, that we can start to see an uptick in those numbers, sir, coming from those jurisdictions, such that we can see a leveling out, sir, of the visitor numbers, which means, sir, more throughput through the airport, and that's something I'm going to just spend a little time on, because you would appreciate, sir, that during COVID, the airport did not make a cent, sir. And I say that in the context of the fact that without regular passenger traffic, sir, an airport is just really a shell. And therefore, it is something that we need to appreciate and understand, that as we, as CARICOM countries in particular, recognizing that we are small, we need to understand what is required to be able to sustain travel, and travel of such a quality, sir, that will see people wanting to come back to your destination, and therefore the need to ensure then that your infrastructure is appropriate, it is welcoming, and therefore would be a part, sir, of the experience that people would have once they arrive in Barbados. So just permit me a minute, sir, just to share a perspective on the cost of travel within the region, sir, because everybody complains that when you look at your ticket, sir, you see the price of the fare, and then you see a whole list of taxes assigned to the fare. And the reality is, sir, that given our size, and it's important that we appreciate that, if you want these wide-body aircraft, as the honourable member said, it means they got certain specification for the length of the runway and the quality of the runway. And a runway, just a road, sir, in Waterhall Land or in Kingston, sir, there's a very specific design to ensure the durability of that, and that this thing costs. So you would appreciate, sir, that if you need to get 2 or 3 miles of runway in order to accommodate these aircraft, which are in production and therefore driving for efficiency, because as the honourable member was quite clear, airlines are looking to service routes that are profitable. And therefore, the design of these aircraft over time, as you would realize, sir, when we were a little younger, sir, the aircraft used to be a little smaller and a little rickety, if you like, sir, back in the day. But now, the aircraft already know, you even got Wi-Fi now in the aircraft now, sir. So you appreciate that, whilst that may seem to be a small thing, the aircraft now has become much more digital. I mean, it's always digital for that matter, but certainly with respect to the design and the tonnage that they can carry, sir, today is very different from aircraft that were produced, sir, back in the 70s and the 80s, and therefore it's important to understand the specs of that. So if you take, sir, a simple example, and let's assume, sir, that to build a proper airport with a proper runway, that is $120 million, sir, just as a number, and you want to finance that, sir, over a 7-year, a 10-year period, sorry, a 10-year period. Now, you would appreciate, sir, that depending on the number of people that actually come through that space, that will determine how any entity, whether government or private sector, will be able to pay for that $120 million, sir, that you have to borrow to put into the infrastructure at any airport. And I make this point, sir, because as we have seen regionally, certainly in the last 10 to 15 years, not just Grantley Adams improve our airport, sir. We have seen every single country in the Eastern Caribbean, as a matter of fact, in the Caribbean for that matter, improve on the infrastructure at their airport. As a result of that, sir, of those series of investments made in the region, then it means that the traveling public not only saw an improvement in facilitation at the airport, but equally would have seen the increase in fees coming about as a result of the fact that you need to recover that investment. Now, most countries in the Caribbean, sir, the governments, whether financed through either state-owned enterprise or otherwise, that expansion. And so therefore, the taxes that people see on the tickets, sir, and this is not an excuse, but this is just the reality. The taxes that people have seen in their airfares have increased because every single Caribbean country, sir, invested in upgrading the airport facilities. Now, truthfully, sir, the numbers matter. Because the difference between getting 1 million tourists a year versus 1 million a month, compared to relative to the cost of the investment, sir, would clearly mean that if you are going to understand that if you're going to try to pay back for this thing over 10 years, it's the difference between somebody paying $10 a trip or $1 a trip on the basis of whether or not it is 1 million a month or 1 million a year, sir. And therefore, driving traffic, sir, through the airport is important as part of being able to determine and calibrate, sir, how much of any airport fee. And I'm just talking about just recovering the capital costs. I'm not even talking about the operating costs. I'm just talking about you've spent money to construct an airport, sir, upgrade the facilities, have all the creature comforts, the duty-free shops, the lounges, all of these things that we want. And the truth is, sir, I really don't. I'm not an airport person. I don't like traveling in that way. I prefer to get away going. I don't like being in the airport at all, because it's just frustrating. But whilst you're there, you might got a little something that you might see for your wife, sir, or your daughter or your son, and you pick it up because you're there. You pass the time, and therefore it becomes a part of how to make you comfortable. And we've all tried to create that type of welcoming environment from our perspective, because whilst we don't have a lot of space with respect to retail, and the times with respect to turnover is relatively short, because for the most part, sir, at our airport, if you have a flight at 3 o'clock, you go at 1 o'clock, and in the main, the flight is on time. You don't really spend a lot of time in the airport. But international travel, oftentimes you have a layover of 3, 4, 5 hours between flights, sir, sometimes, and therefore the airport design and the cost associated with that and all of the services associated with that, sir, is part of what goes into the operations, and therefore, as a passenger, you contribute to the maintenance of the airports wherever you go, and therefore, from a Caribbean perspective, because we don't have that structure of moving people in that connected way, it means that we don't have the same type of throughput that you will see at Heathrow or at a JFK or at a Miami, where you have people coming in from all places and traversing, and therefore you will realize that the fees that they pay on the basis of the numbers going through, sir, is very different from at Grantley Adams, because most of our flights, sir, coming in between 1 and 5 o'clock in the afternoon, sir, and leaving at that time, and therefore you have lulls with respect to passenger traffic during the day, and therefore that is why I know the honourable member is working so hard to ensure that we can get more traffic from the south and the east in order to ensure we can drive traffic through the airport such that the fee that is being charged, sir, for all the nice infrastructure work and stuff then can be moderated, because you can drive traffic through. So you would imagine, sir, that the same cost, if imagine, sir, you build that same airport in St. Kitts, which is a small jurisdiction, the cost is the same. And therefore, unless they're able to have a longer duration with respect to how they intend to finance it, then it means that any fee associated with that either has to be highly subsidized by government, or there's a very long trajectory with respect to the payback in relation to that. And therefore, it's not, as I say, sir, it's not an excuse for when you look at a regional ticket for saying the price is there, but the reality is, sir, we have all made these investments with our best efforts to be able to allow travelers to come to our country and have an ease with respect to transiting through our jurisdiction. And it is something that I feel is important, that in the discussion about regional travel in particular, a lot of the complaints really and truly, yes, has been focused on the price, but for the most part, sir, we know that some of the airlines that have been providing services in the region, sir, the customer service sometimes, sir, has not been as good as it could have been, and delays ensue, and therefore the whole experience and people getting frustrated. Your bag, you finally get there, sir, your bag in there, and all of these types of things, sir, just frustrate people, and then people focus not on what should have been a nice experience, but on the fact that you pay all of this money, sir, and when you finally got where you're going, your bag's in there. And therefore, those are some of the areas within the provision of transport services in the region that I believe that we all need to tighten on, because whether governments put support in, as we are technically doing here, sir, with respect to the reduction in the airport service charge for this 6-month period. That is our contribution, sir, to trying to get more people into the country at this time. That we need to make sure that those who are providing these services, certainly not just for the next 6 months, but just generally speaking, sir, are able to lift their game such that people will say, you know what, I really want to go to Barbados, and I'm going to book Barbados now, sir, and get one of these packages post crop over, but we want you to come for crop over too. But you would appreciate, sir, that whilst we know that there's a natural bump because of crop over, we want to ensure that during the course of the rest of the summer, leading into what will be the so-called fall and leading into the winter, the traditional winter season, that we too see more traffic coming from CARICOM. And the truth is, sir, I know that there used to be quite a number of flights between Barbados and Trinidad, sir, prior to COVID. And these days, sir, you really can't get to Trinidad easily. And I say that because I know Barbados has a very strong business link with Trinidad, and people have been complaining about the lack of flights between Barbados and Trinidad, sir. In the previous life, sir, I used to spend a lot of time in the Eastern Caribbean, sir, and I used to travel there almost every week, sir, going somewhere to do something for somebody, sir. And therefore, I understand the importance of having reliable and reliable regional travel to be able to ensure that you can provide those services. Of course, in the post-COVID environment, a lot of stuff is being done remotely, but there are still things you have to do, sir, on the ground with respect to ensuring that, especially as it relates to in-situ training and the like, sir, for a range of areas, that would mean that I know a lot of our servicemen who provide technical and electrical and engineering services in the region, sir, equally too, would need to ensure that there's reliable service within that space. And I know that a number of our dentists as well provide dental services down the region on a fortnightly basis. And therefore, it is important that we appreciate that the travel within the region is not just for leisure, that Caribbean people do business with each other, sir, in a way that is as seamless as I know that the original founders of CARICOM envisaged people moving between in the islands. I noticed a glance from the honourable member for Christchurch South. I saw him playing his trade in the region, sir, as you would appreciate, with respect to the market. And all of us, sir, in some form or fashion, participate. And the only way that we can do that, sir, is if we have reliable and sustainable travel within the region. I know that there's a lot of attention being paid now to developing a more sustainable maritime space within the context of the single market and single economy. But the reality is, sir, that the provision of services, as well as Caribbean people traveling for leisure, education, and the like, sir, really does rely heavily on air travel. And therefore, it is important that we understand that as governments seek to improve the infrastructure and operators seek to improve the infrastructure at our airports and our seaports, that it is not just a matter of saying that you want to charge these things. It is about understanding that the capacity for the institutions to be able to sustain the level of service that they're providing to the public, and to be able to attract not just investment, but to facilitate, sir, businesses getting out there. I think it's important that we appreciate that the investment in maintenance of our facilities determines actually whether or not airlines will actually put aircraft to come into your destination, because that matters from a civil aviation standards perspective, and therefore we need to appreciate that it is critical to be able to have access, but we need to ensure that we can broaden the footfall, if you like, the traffic through these facilities in order to minimize the incidence of tax as it relates to travelers. One of the things that the honourable member spoke about that I want to take just a very couple of minutes, sir, to address, because I think it is part of, again, how we are going to see opportunities for young people participating in this economy. The honourable member spoke to the fact that there's a shortage of pilots globally, sir, globally. And as we seek to work through the expansion of our civil aviation space, I would like to say to young people in this country, sir, that if there are shortage of pilots globally, let us ensure that we can identify through the Ministry of Education and any other program, sir, to see how many young people we could get involved in the civil aviation space as part of solving that problem. Because at the end of the day, it doesn't make sense having aircraft, but you ain't got nobody to fly them, sir. And therefore, as a region, and certainly as a country, as we build up our civil aviation space, I think it's going to be important that young people see this as an area, sir, that they too can participate in, such that whether it is on a regional basis or international basis, sir, that we know that we will have some level of capacity within the context of the region, sir, to be able to drive this. So I would want to ask the honourable member to ensure that we, in the same way that we have worked with the cruise lines to be able to procure jobs for our people, that in the same vein, sir, that we are able to go after aggressively to ensure that we are training pilots in Barbados in order to ensure that some of those jobs that you identified, that we in Barbados who can see down the road young people getting into this space in order to ensure that whatever, how quickly we can expand our civil aviation, international transport sector as it relates to aviation, that we will have not just pilots, but aircraft engineers and the like, sir, within that entire space. Because we need to ensure that if we are going to encourage more and more airlines coming from north, south, east, and west, sir, to come to Barbados, that Barbados now must create an ecosystem of jobs, sir, and opportunities for Bajans to work from here and travel wherever they need to travel, sir, to provide those side services. And that will then obviously mean, sir, that the opportunities for inclusive growth will actually trickle down, sir, to many a person, sir, within our various communities. And therefore, within that civil aviation space, we need to start a fairly aggressive education program as to what is possible in relation to establishing Barbados not just as a logistics hub, but to ensure that we are capable, sir, working with our CARICOM brothers and sisters, sir, to build the capacity so that we can service the region, but also service the globe, sir, from this region. But I would like to believe, sir, that Barbados being a logistics hub can actually attract people here for training to provide a lot of those services, and therefore, whilst we may see the shortage of our pilots as an issue, let us be part of the solution, sir, by being aggressive with respect to how we engage on that. So the reality is, sir, is that this effort really is to try to resuscitate some of the travel that has been caused by the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic. And I hope that we are able to see not just this as an initial step, but really and truly, sir, to allow for greater opportunity for persons, not just within the tourism sector, but certainly within the civil aviation space, sir, to be able to see this as an opportunity where we can lead the region in terms of helping to solve some strategic problems, but open up, as I said, sir, opportunities for average Bajans, sir, in this country, and the average CARICOM citizen, that on this day, as its 50th anniversary of CARICOM is being celebrated, that we, as Barbados has been not just a founding member, but of the lead responsibility, sir, for establishment of the CSME, that we can lead by example, sir, by working with our CARICOM brothers and sisters to take advantage of what I see, sir, as one of the critical pillars for growth in the Barbados economy, in the region economy going forward. And I want to give this bill, sir, my 100% support. And with those very few words, sir, I'm obliged to you.
Honourable Member Christchurch East.
Mr. Speaker, from the outset, let me say I want to congratulate my friend for his presentation and for the hard work that he does as the Minister of Tourism. Barbados being a tourism-based economy, by default, His is perhaps one of the most important ministries that we have. By practice and execution, he's definitely made it so. So I want to start from the outset by commending him and his hard-working team. We constantly see him in the media. We see him on social media. We see him out there pushing. Always trying to draw more people to Barbados. Always trying to sell Barbados. Always trying to generate initiatives. If one airline drops out, trying to find 3 or 4 more to replace that one. And with our heavy reliance on tourism, his indefatigable efforts contribute in a great way, a significant way, to keeping us afloat and our success in revitalizing our economy. I just want to put that out front. Sir, we've by this amendment, we've gone some way, a small way, towards reducing the overall cost of travel to Barbados. It's a small step, but we need to do more. Why is that? Why is that critical? Our tourism economy has for many years been based on a 6-month economy. For 6 months of the year, you see tons of people in Barbados, and tourists are here, Washway, action in Bridgetown, restaurants full. Come December, January, February, you can't get a spot if you're trying to eat out in Barbados. And then all of a sudden, they on a cutoff date, everything slows down and comes to a grinding halt. The hotels, for the most part, are at half or less than half occupancy. But those who do their Airbnbs, realizing about them booking until coming back on the tourist season. So everything comes to a standstill. But sir, infrastructure doesn't work that way. If you have a product, if you have a facility, then that facility has to be maintained year-round, whether or not people are there. You need to run the ACs year-round. You need to turn the water on so the pipes take the water. You need to flush the toilets. We all know, sir, when you leave a house unoccupied and shut it up for 6 months, you come back, the tiles blown. You realize that something let go in the house and the house flood away. It smells musty. Things that are supposed to be used that haven't been used start to seize up. That, sir, is the reality of the tourism product in Barbados for half of the year. So it is incumbent upon us to find ways to stimulate year-round tourism. It sounds simple. I've had this conversation with the Honourable member before. It sounds simple. But our product has been crafted to attract visitors from a certain place. Don't mind what we do, we reach out. We try to source different markets. The fact is, our main tourists come, I believe, from UK, Europe, Canada. And they come here in the winter months because they want to get away from the cold weather and have a couple of weeks in the sunshine and then go back and face their reality. Sir, on one of the rare breaks that we get, sir, I went to St. Lucia with my wife and some friends for the St. Lucia Music Festival. And at that music festival, there were people from St. Lucia, Dominica, a big contingent from Martinique, Guadeloupe. There were a lot of Bajans there. Actually, the Honourable member was there himself in an official capacity. He got way better treatment than I got. I was almost envious. I had to pay for my drinks. But the Honourable member was there. And the reality is that people come when things are going on. People come when things are going on. So in order to get people here year-round, we need to start offering things year-round. People come in for crop over. Crop over is not in the normal tourist season, but because it is an established festival, people come in at crop over and flood out Barbados. We right now leading up to crop over, so within the next 2 weeks, you can see a lot of people in Barbados. A lot. The week before crop over, you can see tons of people feds burst, people that you didn't see since last year at the same time. And then all of a sudden, 2 days after crop over, everybody gone again. It is incumbent upon us to put things in place that generate interest in Barbados. The government can't do it all. The Honourable Minister can't do it all. Private enterprise has to do some as well. Risks have to be taken, sir, but things have to be put in place. I guess this is where government can actually work with private enterprise to generate, to invest in and work hand in glove with them to generate sustainable activities in Barbados year-round. When the reggae festival is up, or Hennessy Artistry, people once again come in for those shows. So if there's something to do, Barbados is an attractive jurisdiction and destination to come to. Where do we fall down? I had a talk with somebody in St. Lucia, and they were saying to me they used to come to Barbados, but it is cheaper to go from St. Lucia to Miami than it is to go from St. Lucia to Barbados. And that is a reality we face. It is cheaper to get to Miami than it is to go to a lot of other Caribbean destinations. Why do I believe that we need to start putting things in place to harvest the Caribbean tourists? The persons from Europe and North America try to escape the cold and come in a certain bracket. We need tourists in Barbados in the summer months. In the summer months, things in Barbados are dead. All they know, things in Barbados are dead. But if the Caribbean who live like us, have the same schedule as us, they have their children on vacation the same time as us, if we can encourage them to come and vacation in Barbados, then we start to fill that gap where we have our lag. And we have to find ways to reduce the cost of travel to Barbados and the cost of the experience in Barbados. A lot of persons don't want to reduce their offering. They don't want to reduce their price point because they think it looks bad. They have one price point in the summer and a completely disparate price point in the winter. But at some point in time, it must occur to people that it is better to actually have activity going on in that space, if even to cover costs, not to make a profit, if even to cover costs to keep the AC spinning, to keep the pipes running, to keep the engine moving. It may be better to price yourself at certain points to cover costs and generate interest than it is to leave your plant fallow and empty for 6 months of the year. It is a conversation that we have to have across the board. We have to accept that we need people in Barbados at this point in time. At this point in time, half the restaurants are laying off their staff. Half the restaurants are laying off their staff. The taxi drivers are not getting to work. This is a dry point for Barbados. We all know it. It is a dry point for Barbados. You go on the beach, you're not seeing all the deck chairs and things. Oh, it is a dry point. We have to look as a country, not just as tourism. Tourism has their part to play. But we also need to look at how we get the Bajans to stay in the same properties and experience things as a tourist. Why should people come from overseas and experience our country in a way that we have never experienced it? All of the activities we need to start pitching out to Bajans and pricing it at a point that Bajans actually want to avail themselves of it. It is better that we make zero profit sometimes, or the minimal profit, but you still keep persons engaged. It is a conversation that we need to have as a country. It is a conversation that we need to have across the board with all the stakeholders. It is a conversation that we need to have. I can tell you up front, I don't have the solutions. I can see what the problem is. To me, it makes sense what has to happen. But this is where The honorable member, sir, he has been in this business way more than I have been. He lives and breathes this. If ever there was a person who was suited to be the Minister of Tourism, it's probably him. He knows this like the back of his hand. And as I said, I commend and compliment him for the hard work he has done. He has done an exemplary job. He's performed tremendously as a minister in the time that he's been there. Yeah. But it goes past, I wasn't clapping for myself, I was clapping for him. But it goes past just that. A shift needs to happen with those who provide the accommodation. Right? We actually need to decide, you know what, let us across the board start to pitch it at this level in summer to get people to come in. It's not, if one person, if I have an Airbnb property and I reduce my price by half, that's one. It's not going to factor or flag or influence the market anyhow. If myself and the honorable member for Christchurch West do it, that's two. If there's a decision across the board that we're actually going to have a proper CARICOM rate across the board, if there's a decision that this is the summer for locals and we're going to have a Bajan rate, a locals only rate across the board, then it becomes a thing that people pay attention to. We now need to explore all those avenues to make the first tourist a Bajan. The first tourist should be a Bajan. The person we think of when we think in our restaurants should not just be people that don't look like me and you. We also, when planning for how we run our businesses and how we do things in a restaurant and the menus that we offer in restaurants and the price point we pitch in restaurants at a certain point in time, it must be as well to accommodate the locals. So we've started with reducing the tax. But as CARICOM, we have to have agreement that a lot more taxes need to be reduced and to come down. Because we must bring down the bulk of the cost of travel within the Caribbean is the taxes. The taxes are what the country taxes are what push those plane tickets to the point where they compete with a ticket from the Caribbean to the United States. We need to take a position as CARICOM that we are going to drive those prices down. Because at the end of the day, if people start to move between Barbados and St. Lucia and Trinidad and Jamaica, then we keep our product moving year-round. So I want to say that I support this amendment, sir. It is the first step in what needs to be a systematic process to reduce the cost of travel within the Caribbean, and also, sir, to encourage local and regional tourism, that we start to develop a year-round tourism product, because 6 months a year is no longer cutting it for us. Our economy needs stimulation and injection 12 months of the year. So we need to do what we need to do to ensure that that happens. So I applaud this and support this as a first step in an ongoing process. With those few words, sir, I thank you.
Honourable Mr. Michael West Central.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Let me also thank those honourable members who participated in the debate. Let me first recognize the member for Christchurch East Central and the very valid points he made, especially with the possibility of so many young people going into the educational system and looking for opportunities, and as he put it, not only to become pilots, but also other positions within the aviation sector, including engineering and so on. That point is very well taken, Mr. Speaker, because if you look and see what's happening even in the United Kingdom, oftentimes they don't have enough engineers to maintain the service of the aircraft, and therefore they can't take chances, and that's why sometimes you can't get the schedules up. And therefore, that obviously in conjunction with the Ministry of Education, I think it would be an area that we should explore, and certainly from, as Minister responsible for international transport, I will do my part to ensure that we seek to build out those opportunities and encourage young people to participate and get into careers relating to the aviation sector. The issue for us in terms of the airport service charge, as mentioned by the Honourable Member for Christchurch East Central again, the issue as it relates to the investment in an airport. Obviously, the government of Barbados would have concluded the extension of the Grand Liams International runway. That runway is 11,000 feet, designed that even an A380 aircraft can land and take off in Barbados. And the investment that we've done on the runway will certainly pay significant dividends. It does give the airlines the confidence that they require in order to land, be it a 777-300 or A380 or MAX 78, you name it, that they can touch down in Barbados and have that confidence that there'll be no damage done to the aircraft. That is one of the issues that we have obviously to champion. We will continue to champion the safety of our airstrip, the reliability of our maintenance technicians, Mr. Speaker. And I can go on and on. So I just wanted to make reference to those 2 points. In respect of the member of Christchurch East, I want to thank him for his very kind remarks and comments. Certainly, I consider the BTM always to be a team effort. It happens that I'm a leader at this time as the minister, but certainly the efforts that we've put in. It is a very tiring job, as he said, and it is true, but the reality is that we have to do it because the country depends on tourism. Now, I don't think he may have been, and I understand what he said when he said things we did. I believe he was referring to a period where we can perhaps improve the seasonality, which is a larger point that he made in respect to how we build out Barbados' tourism. And that certainly is a goal. We're going to have to continue to build it out. We recognize that restaurants and accommodation sector and taxi drivers and all the persons who directly and indirectly rely on tourism do so because they have a living to make from this sector, and we have to ensure we put our all into it because it is absolutely necessary for the country's fortunes. The tax revenues that we get from this sector, the revenues from national insurance, the disposable income that is spent to create all the economic activity in the country, we have to focus on and we have to build. And I do agree with the Honourable Member that we have to build out tourism as a year-round opportunity and move it away from the seasonality. It does take time, but the strategy that we've discussed before during the estimates debate, like I said, in respect of trying to go after like the Gulf states and their summer when it's too hot for them, is an opportunity for our summer in Barbados. Those are the opportunities. And if you read and you see what's happening in the Maldives, for example, you see in terms of erosion, and oftentimes people get tired of that particular destination. They want to seek out new destinations. And the whole issue of multi-destinational travel which is what we have built out in Barbados and certainly the Caribbean, where you can come to Barbados as a hub and you can go on to other destinations. You can come back here and utilize our services. So I take the points made, and what I would like to inform the Honourable House as well, that in addition to the charters that will be undertaken next year as well, and we're going to, as I said in my presentation, we are going to ensure that those charters start a bit earlier. But beyond that, building out a calendar of annual events. We do have the calendar of events. We have to get into more opportunities for music festivals and other festivals, and we have food and rum. And on every visit, every occasion, I have to visit a destination. We promote not only crop over, we promote food and rum, we promote our marathon, we promote sporting activities, we promote Barbados as a lifestyle center, we promote Barbados as a place to come and work, and with the advent, obviously, of work from home, it is great. It presents wonderful opportunities for us to further diversify our tourism product. So I've taken everything to heart. I will follow up, and therefore, there's not much left for me to say. the BTMI would have already addressed the whole issue of KLM that will not be coming back this winter season, so I don't have to go into too many details on that one. But to assure the House that we will continue to put Barbados on a sure footing in respect of tourism. The Prime Minister in her budget was also kind enough to give the BTMI some additional marketing support. That was approximately $5 million. We are spending it in such a way as obviously to drive additional revenues to the country, and we will continue with that program that we've launched in addition to the other marketing opportunities that we have in the market space. If you were, for example, in Frankfurt, you pass through Frankfurt Airport, because that's obviously a very key international airport. You will see the large-scale advertising that we're doing there. If you're in Chicago, you will see the very large displays that we have. The same thing applies to Los Angeles, you name it. We are going into areas such as Denver, especially when they have their winter, and they can see the sunshine, and they can see the water, and they can see the turtles, and they can see the catamaran, and they can see all the attractions that we have to offer to obviously drum up additional support. I might tell you, Mr. Speaker, as well, that there are additional announcements to be made in terms of airlift. We're not ready for those. We're still in discussions with some airlines. But I assure the Honourable Chamber that when we're in a position to speak to these issues, we will come back and we will make the appropriate announcement. As I've said before, I believe in transparency. We share all the data. We have nothing to hide in the ministry, and we have to do what we have to do to work hard to ensure that we maintain our numbers, and more importantly, Mr. Speaker, that we track our spend. And as I indicated during my budget presentation, we now have a mechanism that we can track spend to make it go in the right direction. So therefore, Mr. Speaker, with those few words, I beg to move that this bill be read a third time.
No, second time. Honourable member, second time.
Second time, sorry.
The question is that this bill be read a second time. All those honourable members in favour, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Me think the ayes have it.
Mr. Speaker, I beg that you don't leave the chair and the House resolves itself in the committee for further consideration of this bill.
The question is that the Speaker do not leave the chair and the House resolve itself into committee for further consideration of this bill. All those honourable members in favour, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Me think the ayes have it.
This Honourable House is now in committee.
Clause 1.
Mr. Speaker, I beg that clause 1. Sorry. Mr. Chairman, I beg that clause 1 stand part.
The question is that clause 1 stand part. All honourable members in favour, say aye. Aye. Honourable members against, say no. Thinks the ayes have it.
Mr. Speaker, Mr. Chairman, I beg that clause 2 stand part.
The question is that clause 2 stand part. All honourable members in favour, say aye. Aye. Honourable members against, say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Mr. Chairman, I beg that clause 3 stand part.
The question is that clause 3 stand part. All honourable members in favour, say aye. Aye. Honourable members against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Mr. Chairman, I do ask that you report to His Honour the Speaker the passage of one bill in committee.
The question is that I do now report to His Honour the Speaker the passing of one bill in committee. All honourable members in favour, please say aye. Honourable members against, say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
The chairman has reported the passing of one bill in committee. Honourable Member.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that the bill be passed and be...
Read a third
Sorry,
time.
the bill be read a third time, Mr. Speaker.
The question is that the bill be read a third time. All those honourable members in favour, please say aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it. Honourable Member.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that the bill be passed and be cited as the Airport Service Charge Amendment Act 2023.
The question is that the aforementioned bill be passed and so cited. All those honourable members in favour, please say aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it. This bill is passed and so cited.
Mr. Speaker, order number 10, please. In the name of the Minister in the Ministry of Finance and Economic Affairs, to move the second reading of the Central Bank of Barbados Amendment Bill 2023.
Honourable Member for Christchurch, East Central.
Thank you so very much, Mr. Speaker. The bill before the chamber, sir, seeks to address a few matters that we believe will further strengthen the work that we've already done, sir, to ensure the autonomy, sir, and independence of the Central Bank of Barbados. You would recall, sir, that in 2020, we passed a new central bank bill, sir, that really, at that point, as we were in the midst of the pandemic, sir, given the tremendous work that had been done prior to in the year or so prior to that, sir, we passed a new central bank act that, for the first time in our history, sir, saw the introduction of a mechanism by which, prior to that, a Minister of Finance could get up this morning, sir, and say to the central bank governor, I no longer need your services, and therefore be ensured that that was no longer the case, but to further strengthen the work of the bank. Very clear and conscious, sir, that what had transpired prior to us taking office, sir, with respect to the operation of the central bank, was something that really, sir, in the history of our country, should not have happened. Now, as you are aware, sir, I still consider myself a central banker, sir, because that's my real training as an economist, sir. Started at the central bank, and so the central bank, certainly as an institution, sir, is very near and dear to my heart. But of course, having a different responsibility now to discharge, it is important that the public appreciates that as a government coming to office in 2018, faced with a myriad of mission-critical issues, resolving issues in relation to how the central bank, prior to us taking office, was conducting itself. We started with ensuring then that the new bill that was passed in 2020 sought to resolve a number of those peculiar issues. Now, this bill today, sir, seeks to amend that which we passed in 2020, and I'm just going to take the opportunity here this morning, sir, just to highlight a few areas that I believe are important in relation to what we are seeking to do now, given all that we've seen certainly in the last 2.5 years or so with respect to the pandemic, and as well as a new set of areas that we have introduced in additional responsibilities for the bank to undertake, and therefore these amendments seek to address what, in our view, will address some of those issues in a very critical way, but also to further strengthen the operation of the board in relation to how it operates moving forward. Now, sir, let me take this opportunity on the floor of Parliament to, and I've done so publicly already, but not in Parliament, to give thanks to the previous governor, Mr. I know I didn't ask your permission, sir, but permit me to offer my public thanks and gratitude to the previous governor, Cleviston Haynes, for leading the central bank through what was a very, very critical time in this country's history, given all that had transpired prior to us taking office, sir. And it could not have been easy, given what we are amending here today, sir, to introduce, given that when he was substantively, sir, a deputy governor at the bank, that he was excluded, sir, from the operations of the bank, sir, in a way, sir, that you would appreciate, sir, from an institutional perspective, really is not healthy. And Mr. Haynes led the bank, I think, with grace and honor through a very, very, very turbulent time. And it is important that as we seek to assure Barbadians and to reassure Barbadians that as government, we have been committed to rebuilding the institutional strengths that hitherto, sir, contributed positively to the development of Barbados. The central bank, as a leading institution in this country, sir, there was a time in the past, and I've said so in this chamber, sir, where people listened very carefully to the central bank governor and officials of the central bank to get a sense as to the pulse as to where the economy is heading, sir. And we want Barbadians, again, to have that same confidence in the central bank as an institution. And I believe that the work that has been done and continues to be done will reassure that the public that the central bank is actually acting in the interest of the country as opposed to colluding, sir, and I use that term deliberately, sir, colluding with respect to the practice of fiscal indiscipline, as was the case, sir, under the previous administration. Now, one of the amendments here, sir, speaks to the fact that, and it's addressed directly in the schedule, that deputy governors, sir, shall have the right to attend board meetings, of course, not as ex officio, but not have the right to vote, as part of ensuring that there is transparency and openness with respect to the operations of the bank. You would recall, sir, that we created the notion of the executive committee, which includes the governor and the two deputy governors as currently stated in the existing legislation. So we created that executive committee to ensure that the bank runs in a cohesive fashion, sir. And to the extent that, and I must tell you that when this originally came up, and I know the honourable member for St. Michael South Central always says and reminds us that we are not governing for ourselves, but we always have to think about what is possible down the road. And so we, in the law, created the notion of the executive committee within the bank to ensure that there's always a relationship, if you like, sir, between the governor and the deputy governors in the management of the institution, to avoid a situation ever arising again where a governor could effectively sideline a deputy governor in the operations of the institution. Because you would appreciate, sir, that that type of behavior really is not conducive for, is well certainly not by any way best practice in any part of the world. But equally, sir, in a small jurisdiction like Barbados, it is something that really should never ever be encouraged at all. So we created the executive committee, and we've now put within the context of the schedule of the bill that specifically that deputy governors will be afforded the opportunity to attend board meetings, because in the absence, sir, of the governor, as you know, the governor effectively, sir, is the executive chair of the board, that in the absence of a governor, for whatever reason, that a deputy will assume the chairmanship of the board as of right and be able to vote, obviously, in that board meeting when the deputy governor, as appropriate, is appointed to act as governor whilst the governor is not available, in order to ensure continuity within the context of how the board is managed. You would recall, sir, that one of the things that we did to strengthen the operations of the central bank and its board is that, unlike other institutions where a couple of things. Once the government changes, most boards typically would tender their resignation and typically would receive appointments for a specific period of time. You would recall, sir, that we implemented a system of rolling tenure. So you have members with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 years duration to ensure that for the stability of the country, that the central bank board will always have people with some type of institutional memory, rather than just changing all of the board members all at once. We put those provisions in place in the original, in the new bill. And therefore, we feel it's important that the public appreciates that this government has sought at every instance as it relates to how it treats the central bank, because you would appreciate, sir, that given the behavior of the past, it would have been easy and tempting for the government to get in and try to direct, sir, everything that was happening in relation to the central bank. But having understood the importance of the bank in the development trajectory of the country, sir, we have sought at every step to further strengthen, sir, how the bank operates, to improve transparency and to hold them accountable, sir, with respect to the conduct of monetary policy, particularly given that monetary policy must always, in effect, sir, be in sync with good fiscal discipline, and it is something, sir, that certainly this government will continue to practice, such that the appropriate monetary policy as exercised by the central bank would actually make sense for the further development of the country. And so we have been very deliberate, sir, with respect to these provisions to ensure that the board of the central bank, sir, is able to be managed in a way that does not create, sir, too much churn in relation to how board members either are appointed or in relation to how the board actually relates to the executive committee and the like. Now, the other element, sir, that we are, one of the amendments that we are asking for here, sir, and it is in relation to the fact that we are doing a couple of things, sir, in light of some additional duties that the bank has undertaken. You would recall, sir, that in 2021 we passed a new payments system bill in addition to fair credit reporting bill, sir, and in the last 5 years, the bank has been leading, one of the officers of the bank, sir, has been leading government's charge in relation to matters relating to anti-money laundering, FATF, and the like, sir, within that space. Equally, sir, with the evolution of the introduction of a number of digital infrastructure solutions for the financial services sector, it is now important, sir, that the bank, in addition to its existing the regular research and bank supervision mechanisms, as well as the operational side, that these additional duties as have been put within the context of the mandate of the bank, that we're able now to just address this structurally to ensure that there's clarity with respect to how these things will be done moving forward. And so, Mr. Speaker, one of the amendments being asked here is in relation to increasing the number of deputy governors from 2 to 3. And the rationale for that, and just for the avoidance of any doubt, sir, there's already an existing post within the structure of the central bank, sir, that is called advisor to the governor. The advisor to the governor, sir, remuneration is exactly the same as any of the existing deputy governors. And therefore, with this additional mandate, as I said, sir, that has been undertaken by the central bank in the last couple of years to help lead the transformation of the financial services industry, but certainly as it relates to being able to ensure then that Barbados equally, with respect to the challenges of correspondent banking and the like, sir, that the creation of this new post, focus on in these strategic areas, sir, is going to be important for helping Barbados to remain on the cutting edge in terms of being able to respond to these challenges, who will then obviously focus on ensuring then that not just regulation, but certainly the opportunities for us to be able to regulate with growth in mind is going to be important, because these are areas that Barbados needs to get up to speed and maintain very, very, very quickly, because the work that has been done in the last 5 years by the current Director of Bank Supervision, certainly being seconded to government to lead this specific effort, sir, has been nothing short of extraordinary. And I know that every week for the last maybe 4.5 years or so, almost 5 years, sir, every week, officials from the central bank have been leading with all the agencies of government to address all of the matters in relation to the FATF, the OECD, all of these matters, sir, that prior to had not seen that type of approach. Now, one will say that the work has been done. But as you know, sir, in this space, that with every turn, there's always some goalpost being shifted somewhere, sir, that we need to ensure that the country is always on top from a surveillance perspective, and therefore it is going to be important that not just the central bank as one of the competent authorities in relation to financial services, but equally the work that we're doing on the revenue authorities side, sir, that we're always in tandem to ensure that the defense of Barbados, sir, of our reputation, and that we are creating these right structures to be able to facilitate growth and to ensure that our macroeconomic situation is well managed, that we will be in a position, sir, to effectively have these things monitored strategically, led by this additional post of deputy governor in a way, sir, that absolutely makes sense to prevent Barbados, sir, from being always on the back foot in terms of responding to these matters. But as I said, sir, that we are creating an environment where we want to regulate with growth in mind in a very proactive way, and therefore this is going to allow us an opportunity to be able to do that. Just very briefly, sir, because I know that recently we published the central bank report in Parliament, and as per usual, the members of the public obviously had an opportunity to go through that publication, and there was some commentary in relation to the fact that the central bank has a hole in its balance sheet of $1.6 billion. Let me take this opportunity once again, sir, to remind the public that that hole did not magically appear, nor it is nothing that this government certainly wanted to happen. But you would recall, sir, when we came to this chamber and did the debt restructuring bill, sir, in 2018, when we indicated that the previous government, having printed the money facilitated by the previous the two previous governors of the central bank, that led to a situation where Barbados' reserve situation had deteriorated to the point, sir, when we took office, we were just about 4.5 weeks of import cover, and there was a debt service payment of $100 million, sir, in June of 2018, as you know, sir, at the beginning of the hurricane season, and therefore Barbados' situation was quite precarious. In addition to that, sir, the treasury bills that were being offered to the public at that point in time, sir, treasury bill rates was 7.25 and 7.5, sir, for 3 months and 6 months treasuries, sir. I do recall saying to you in this chamber, sir, that as a young economist, remembering treasury bill rates at 0.5%, sir, at the central bank. Sorry, the treasury bill rates was 0.5%. And therefore, the idea that the debt situation, given all the downgrades that we had experienced, sir, and the central bank facilitating, sir, expenditures that were completely run away, sir, is something that, as an economist, as a citizen, sir, was completely on the wrong path, and therefore the government undertaking a comprehensive debt restructuring, we determined that those treasuries that the central bank was holding, which facilitated the indiscipline that was being perpetrated on the citizens of this country prior to that, had to come to an end, and therefore the printing of that money, the hole that is currently in the balance sheet of the central bank, sir, is clearly because of that indiscipline of which the central bank had undertaken at the time. During 2019 and 2020, sir, there were discussions about whether or not, or not whether, when, sir, to recapitalize the central bank. And I want to say to the public here that you would appreciate that in the midst of a pandemic, sir, where we were squarely focused on trying to minimize the economic fallout from the pandemic, trying to ensure that households can keep their heads afloat, sir, that businesses can continue in a very strained environment, sir. The public health response that was required, sir, to keep people as safe as we could possibly keep people, sir, that was first and foremost on the minds of the government. And therefore, when we look at the options with respect to how to recapitalize the central bank, sir, we determined in 2020 that in the middle of the pandemic, that making the central bank whole again, sir, was not amongst the list of priorities for which the government at that time would contemplate. Therefore, we determined that we will put that on pause until the economy recovers such and we're able to do that. But in the interim, sir, you would recall that during the debt restructuring, we issued the central bank with specific securities that would allow them to be profitable, sir, profitable, such that the solvency of the bank would not be in question, because a central bank is not like a regular commercial bank and the like, sir, in relation to its operations. The fact is, sir, that no bank out there can go and print money. A central bank can. And that unique ability of central bank is a powerful thing, but if used in the wrong way, sir, could potentially lead to economic calamity. And I hope that Barbadians appreciate the work that this government undertook within the first 18 months of coming to office to right-size not just the economy, but certainly to ensure that that which was done contributed to by the central bank and the last government, that we have now put that behind us. And I hope that these amendments and the way that the new boards and future boards, sir, and future governments, I hope that the public would appreciate that unless you're able to have this very clear balance, sir, between the public finance and its management and how monetary policy in this country, sir, is executed, that we're able to ensure that the interests of the country is first and foremost, and that the actions of the central bank must first, sir, be to ensure that it is acting to maintain the integrity of the exchange rate, but then beyond that, sir, that to ensure that we are fostering a very strong environment for growth. And therefore, we believe that we have been able to settle affairs within the context of the bank, and that given the additional mandate that we have placed on it now, that their focus, sir, their focus will be on ensuring that those interests are served to better improve the lives of Barbadians. So this is an important element in terms of how we will be able to address the governance of the board, and therefore it is important that we understand the strategic realignment of the bank in terms of what is required moving forward. Now, sir, equally, we are also have an amendment here to increase the number of board members from 5 to 6. And beyond the director of finance. Now, in that as well, sir, we want to address just a couple of matters here in relation to given the staggered nature of the board, we're looking at how that has been working operationally, sir, and we are going to make an amendment, sir, here at clause 7, to ensure that should a director become temporarily available to serve, sir, for whatever reason, that we have the power to appoint someone in their stead on a temporary basis that will perform the role of the director in order to not necessarily disadvantage the original director, and therefore we feel that this too adds to how the ease with which the board can function without having to go through a whole exercise in terms of removal of a director. And it is important that we understand that as we mature as a independent country, and certainly as a republic, that these types of governance structures can really serve as a model for how critical institutions like the central bank can be run, and therefore it is a provision here that we will pass in order to avoid any specific dislocation in relation to the functions of the board. And in addition to that, sir, we are also making an amendment here for specifically to ensure that when we speak to accounting matters, that the accounting matters as it relates to the bank also speaks to audit matters as well, because as you would appreciate, sir, in the performance of what is traditionally an audit committee, it is not often clear as to who will deal with that, and therefore one of the directors specifically appointed, sir, will have their responsibility for accounting as well as audit functions of the board, in order to ensure then that the governance structure of the board is always taken into consideration. Now, we have been quite deliberate, sir, in ensuring that obviously the persons that you appoint to the board, sir, are more than capable of understanding not just the importance of the bank, but the importance of how the bank must now evolve, sir, to serve Barbados in the third decade and going forward of the 21st century, because we cannot afford the type of institutional decay that was witnessed quite easily, sir, prior to us taking office in 2018. The central bank has been and certainly celebrated 50 years last year. It is a mature institution, and we must seek at every point, as we have had to do with everything, sir, in a sense, reassess and take fresh guard as required, sir, to assure ourselves that the institutions are actively renewing its mandate, if you like, sir, and understanding through that introspection how it is best serving the public. And therefore, it is important that from a governance perspective that directors take that responsibility very, 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 very seriously. And therefore, the staff and the management and the executive committee working in concert with the board is going to be expected clearly to be able to perform that role going forward. And therefore, the independence of the bank, we believe, and certainly as I told you, sir, I'm a central banker, and I'm clear in my own mind the importance of the separation. The only thing that the Ministry of Finance retains is the Exchange Control Authority function, as you would appreciate, sir, because it is a matter of policy that the government of Barbados determines that the peg is 2-to-1, and therefore everything that the government does and everything that the central bank does, sir, is really to ensure that that policy stance is maintained. So we just completed a bill by the Honourable Member for St. Michael West Central dealing with airport service charge and tourism, and the reality is, sir, that the earning of foreign exchange is critical and key to ensuring that we can maintain the integrity of the peg, and therefore every policy that we undertake as government, every policy that the central bank is engaged in from a monetary policy perspective has to coincide at some stage, sir, with how it impacts the ability of the country to earn foreign exchange, which means our ability to pay for the things that we consume that we're not obviously making 100% here in Barbados, and therefore every effort to help grow the economy, not just tourism, but other aspects of tourism, of foreign exchange earnings, is going to be critical for ensuring that we're able to, in a sense, pay our way in the world, sir, and to allow Barbadians obviously an opportunity not just to do business in Barbados, but to do business outside of Barbados and become a part of the ecosystem, sir, of foreign exchange earning. So it is important that, as it says Clause 5, the formulation, adoption, and implementation of monetary policy and the financial stability policy of the bank now is important. Well, it has always been, but we're making it clear that the monetary policy and financial stability policy is important, because that is key to ensuring that we can maintain the fixed exchange rate. And if at some point in the future, sir, the people of Barbados and the government determines that they may wish to do something different, then you have to come back to this place, sir, and make that clear, because obviously you want to ensure that people appreciate and understand that there are consequences to the type of behavior that we saw prior to us taking office. We don't ever want to go back at all to that type of thing, sir, where people are issuing travel advisories as to whether people should come to Barbados, which of course, sir, as you would appreciate, affects your ability to earn foreign exchange, sir. It affects your ability in terms of investor confidence in your economy, sir. And those are the things that we came as part of our mission critical agenda. We fixed, and in addition to that, sir, we also fixed structurally some of the issues as it relates to the central bank in relation to this matter. So, be that as it may, sir, it is important that we understand that we continue to strengthen our institutions. And I think as a government, we have demonstrated that consistently, that along with ensuring that the economy can recover, that strengthening our institutions, sir, to ensure that we can maintain a stable environment is going to be key to helping us get out of the situation that we found ourselves in 2018, and certainly with COVID will accelerate now, sir, the implementation of some of these key reforms. At clause 13, sir, notwithstanding subsection 3, the bank may acquire securities transferred to it by the government in accordance with section 7 and 43 and pursuant to the debt holders' approval of Debt Restructuring Act. Simply put, sir, we are reopening the domestic capital markets. And as a consequence of that, sir, and let me remind the public, sir, that when we came to office, we reduced the ways and means, sir, you will remember, we reduced the ways and means of the central bank, meaning the money that the central bank would ordinarily lend to government, which was usually 10% of forecast revenue, sir, as like an overdraft facility. We reduced that to 7.5 in 2018, sir, and that remains the case today. We also imposed a cap of aggregate securities that the central bank can hold as to 40% of government's expenditure, sir, as a cap to ensure that, because nothing was there before, because the previous government was just a lot, well, between the previous government and the central bank, sir, was continuing to purchase securities. The debt was getting more and more expensive, sir. On the short-term side, it was getting hard for it to be serviced, and everywhere you turn, sir, people were quarreling about this tax, the next tax, and all kind of taxes, sir, to try to service this. We are reopening and restarting the domestic capital markets. We've seen that, sir, with respect to the introduction of the BOSS Plus bonds already, and we are going to very shortly look to start the treasury reissuance of treasury bills, sir, within the market space. The primary thing that was restructured on the central bank's balance sheet, sir, was $1.6 billion, sir, in treasury bills that they were holding at the time. And therefore, it is important that we understand that whilst that is of the past, moving forward, sir, given all the reforms that we have undertaken, sir, that getting the market restarted is going to be important, and therefore to act as a to be able to participate within that space is going to be important that the bank be allowed to purchase bills as needed in order to ensure that, in addition to what we have already given them to assure their operating profit yearly, that they too can participate in the capital markets. Now, why is this important, sir? Under normal circumstances, every year, the central bank, when making a profit, sir, they will retain a small share of that profit, as you would appreciate, sir, for reinvestment, and give to the government of Barbados the excess. That has not happened, sir, for the better part of 7 or 8 years now. Okay? For the better part of 7 or 8 years now. And we need to ensure that things return to normality, because technically, sir, a central bank really and truly, sir, should never really be making a loss. Should never. Should never be making a loss. It is one of those institutions, don't worry about the balance sheet, sir. There's one of those institutions that a central bank can determine interest rates in the market, sir, the rate at which banks borrow from it, the rate at which overnight liquidity is provided, sir, and all of that. And therefore, in a financial system, in an economy, sir, a central bank making a loss is something that is extraordinary. And therefore, we need the central bank to be profitable again, sir, such that it is paying money back into the treasury as it is supposed to. It is set up effectively, sir, to make sure that its operations, it can cover its operations, retain a small part of those earnings for reinvestment, and then pay over to the government, as you would appreciate, sir, any excess. And therefore, we need to ensure then that they too, like any other person in the market, can participate within the context of the capital markets that government will reopen. And therefore, it is important. It's an important tool, not just of our own liability management, but equally in relation to elements of profitability in terms of the central bank moving forward. Now, there's an amendment here, sir, for which really relates to the ability for persons to supply information to the bank. Now, I had the opportunity last week, sir, to speak at the Barbados Coalition of Service Industries event. And I take this opportunity in reference to this clause, sir, to say to Barbadian companies and individuals, sir, that whether it's the central bank or the statistics or the department or the Ministry of Labor, same hotel sector, sir, we need you to complete the balance of payment survey, sir, of the central bank. The reason we need the information is because it's not for tax purposes or anything, sir. We need to know where the money coming from. Every year when we do this exercise, sir, there's a large amount of money in the survey that is referred to as errors and omissions, sir, and sometimes it is upwards of 30, sometimes 40% of the foreign exchange, where we literally cannot account for which sectors this foreign exchange is attributed to. And therefore, from a policy-making perspective, sir, it hampers our ability to know exactly how sectors are performing, because we are not getting the type of response to the banks, to the central bank balance of payment survey, as is the case. And therefore, rather than we wanted to fine you, and we did make a provision that when the central bank sends you the survey, sir, and you don't respond, that the provision here is to fine you administratively, because it's not a criminal, it's not meant to be a criminal conviction by any stretch of imagination. But we want and would like, sir, desperately, for the private sector, all elements of the private sector, sir, to be able to respond to these surveys, because it does make a substantive difference to how the analysis of the earning of foreign exchange and the different strategies that we have to employ in terms of being able to ensure that we can, through our bilateral arrangements, see how we can expand the earning of foreign exchange in a range of ways. And therefore, whether it is companies trading on the stock exchange and those monies flowing through the country, sir, we need to know. And therefore, as something as simple as the completion of these surveys, it really does allow us to do some wonderful things. And as someone who used to make a living from data, sir, I can tell you this is critical for how we can unlock additional opportunities for some of the same young people that I spoke to, sir, in relation to how we are able to mine data globally from Barbados in order to help, again, earn foreign exchange. And therefore, it is something that I cannot underscore the importance, sir, of, and therefore, whilst I know the central bank does not want, the truth is, sir, if people want to give the central bank $10,000, they can, but I would prefer the information, sir, rather than the $10,000, because it's really, the $10,000 is good on the one hand, but the reality is, sir, it's the information that we really need to ensure that the government, working with the private sector and the sector stakeholders, can open up additional opportunities for the country to earn foreign exchange. And therefore, it is something that I really can't impress enough, sir, how critical it is for persons to respond to the central bank. So this in a nutshell, sir, really is just about how do we, as I said, improve on the operations of the board, improve on given the expansion of the mandate of the central bank, certainly the last two to 3 years, that we are embarking on a structure now that we feel will be relevant for the central bank to move forward in the 21st century. You would appreciate, sir, that with heavy investment in digitization, heavy investment in digital payments, the ecosystem is going to be built out, certainly over the next few years, in terms of not just how credit ratings for individuals, but equally the development of a payments ecosystem across the country. We've worked very, very hard with we are working with the African Exim Bank, sir, to see how we can resolve some issues of payments. And one of the things that I am hopeful that the heads of government will relook again is many years ago, sir, you know, we used to have the Caribbean Multilateral Clearing Facility, and perhaps it failed because the timing wasn't right. But with technology today, and certainly the work that we're doing with the African Exim Bank, we may want to revisit that as we trade amongst each other, and even as we were just discussing, sir, with the previous bill, that the ability for us to move regionally and travel and to pay for that travel regionally, if we're able to have the structures such that if you're in the OECS, I'm in Barbados, and we can settle those payments, sir, rather than having to use US dollars, but we can settle the payment in EC or Barbados dollars, sir, without having to use hard currency, then those are things there that will make a substantive difference, and therefore the central bank, working with other central banks in the region, that is something that we will want to relook to ensure that we are only using the hard currency, meaning the tradable currencies, or the US dollars and the pounds and those types of other currencies, that we can settle amongst ourselves, as well as others who are prepared to do so, such that we can keep the reserves as is, and we are settling as far as possible within the context of a domestic currency arrangement and situation. But it is going to be important, sir, that as with these technologies have made it easier today, and with the bank, the African Exim Bank, potentially seeking to backstop some of those trade payments, then we believe that it stands a better chance of being successful today, such that not just central banks, but as we work with, and I know that the work that we're doing with Guyana and Suriname in relation to establish on the agriculture side, can serve as a very critical test case for us being able to see this working again. And therefore, I hope that we can get this up and running quickly, because it really does make a difference to our monetary policy, sir. It makes a difference to how we use our foreign exchange, and therefore all of this is part of what the central bank really now must lead within the context of CARICOM, in order to ensure, as I said, sir, earlier, that our policies are consistent with respect to driving growth and to including people in the process. So those, sir, are really the essence of the amendments before the chamber. We believe that with the bank remaining absolutely focused, sir, on fulfilling its mandate, which is really to drive, along with, I know the member for St. James South has been driving the financial literacy element within the ministry. The central bank has been doing its part to support that, as well as some of the other institutions. But it is going to be important now, sir, that everybody, all of the stakeholders, and educate, if you like, sir, make aware the public as to how these interventions that we are making actually will benefit them directly and indirectly, and such that there is an absolute clear link, sir, between the micro perspective as well as the macro perspective in terms of the economy. As we do that, we get the digital payments in, sir, we enhance the financial literacy, decision-making with respect to these businesses, then it means then that we feel that the elements and the ingredients, sir, of a cohesive and coherent growth strategy, that those elements will be brought to bear, sir, unlocking finance, building financial literacy across communities, bringing options for investment to people, sir, on their phones and the like, sir. Financial inclusion, we believe, is going to be important, an important element with respect to how we are going to unlock growth in the economy. And you need your central bank, the apex of the financial sector, sir, to be leading and driving some of this innovation. And therefore, we feel that given its renewed mandate now, that it can serve, I think, the long-term interests of Barbados well, working collaboratively with other partners to be able to bring that to the fore. And so, sir, with those very few words, I will beg to move that this bill be read a second time. I'm obliged to you.
Parliament for Christchurch East.
Mr. Speaker, I rise in support of this amendment. Sir, I sometimes think it's necessary for us to explain and give a context that allows people to understand what it is that we do in here and sometimes why we do things. And this bill has a number of parts to it, but perhaps the most significant part is the recognition of the role of the deputy governor. That's basically what it is. The recognition of the role of the deputy governor. That's the one I want to focus on. Sir, there's convention. As a lawyer, sir, you know that there's convention that effectively has the force of law, actually our common law or unwritten laws, which we derive as colonies and passed down, were based on things that were done for as far back as people could remember, but never had to be written down because they were accepted by everybody as being law. Where you wanted to create laws that differed, or you wanted to change the status quo in such a way as it differed from what came before, then you would set out deliberate pieces of legislation. But when you've finished your legislative agenda, and there was nothing specifically speaking in legislation to a particular aspect, then you fell back on what the convention was. Now, it had always been the convention at the central bank that the deputy governor of the central bank would attend meetings. That makes good sense. If I'm the principal in an organization and I have a number two, it is important that number two knows what is going on at all points in time, especially if number two steps forward into my shoes if I'm not available. I mean, there's one of the school rules at Harrison College, and I think it's written into a lot of the other school rules, is that a prefect has the delegative authority of the headmaster and must be treated with respect at all times. And that puts it in context that although the prefect is a student, they carry a certain amount of authority, and you codify what that authority is. That was never done in relation to the deputy governors of the central bank. So we had an anomalous situation, sir, with the last government, where the deputy governor of the central bank was not allowed to attend board meetings. But if perchance the governor had to be out or traveling or could not be there, the deputy governor was expected to step into his shoes and run and manage the central bank as if he had full authority and full knowledge. The only way to have full authority, sir, and full knowledge is to be party and have access to all of the information that the principal has. My good friend here from Christchurch West, sir, a lot of people may not know, but in addition to having a degree in theology, he's also a pilot, contractor, many other things. And he said, when you're a pilot flying a plane by yourself, if you fail, if you lapse, if you become sick, if you're unable to carry through with what you're doing, the plane is going to crash. If you are a pilot on a plane with other officials of the company, whether it be a co-pilot or air hostesses, flight attendants, maybe politically correct, sir. He drew the point that the pilot always flies with his co-pilot. If for some reason the pilot has to leave and come out to go to the bathroom, a stewardess, a flight attendant, every time I say happen to say it, in other words, sir, please read flight attendant into that. If the pilot has to step out, a flight attendant goes into the cockpit with the co-pilot, so there are two people in the cockpit. If the co-pilot comes out, then the flight attendant goes in with the pilot. but you at all times have the second pair of eyes as an added measure of security, that if something happened to the principal, somebody can raise an alarm or deal with the matter. This is good governance. It is simply good governance. In most companies, sir, you have a CEO and COO. Whoever the number two is, they tend to shadow what the number one does, so that in the event that they have to step into their shoes, they are expected to make all the decisions that the number one can make. They have the delegative authority of the principal when called upon to act in their position. It makes no sense, or made no sense, for the deputy governors to be excluded from board meetings, that they're expected to have all of the background information to, if called upon, to step into the shoes of the governor through vacation, illness, whatever. This had been the pattern forever. Everybody understood that that was what was expected. It was done as a matter of course. It was never questioned. It was never an issue because it makes sense. We had an anomalous situation, sir, under the last administration where the deputy governors were barred from meetings of the board. They were not allowed to be there. They were not allowed to partake of the same information, receive the same reports, be party to the same questions or clarifications that would enable them to seamlessly step into the shoes of the governor if the occasion so required. It should not be the case where we actually have to focus and put legislation in place to govern that. But you know, sir, perhaps it is best. It is best because obviously the anomalous situation can happen. It happened once before, and we don't want it to ever happen again. We could have continued, sir, as we have, that the deputy governor, before the passage of this, under this administration, attends meetings. But because of the potential, the central bank being one of the most important organs in the country and the principal financial institution in the country, the integrity of the central bank has to be protected, sir. The confidence, the public confidence in the running of the central bank has to be protected. The decisions of the central bank, the governor and the hierarchy of the central bank must be able to stand up to scrutiny. That was not necessarily the case before, but it has to be the case going forward. We are coming out of a difficult time, sir, and there's an upward trajectory in the country. There's confidence in our economy. The economy is growing. There's confidence in what the Honourable Prime Minister is doing. She's out there on the world stage raising money for climate financing, pushing the Bridgetown Initiative, generating confidence in our economy, enabling us to get loans and be able to benefit from concessions. Confidence has come back to the Barbados economy. The Honourable Member, sir, for Christchurch East Central is a star. He is there and he allows the Prime Minister, the Honourable Prime Minister, to be able to do what it is that she has to do, knowing that home is being covered. The Honourable Member for Christchurch East Central is party to a lot of the same information that the Prime Minister is. When matters of finance are being discussed or meetings are being had, he is there right along with her. That way, when she has to travel, he can seamlessly step in. And the business of the country does not falter. The policies are advanced, the procedures are adhered to, and the country seamlessly moves forward when the substantive Minister of Finance is not here. Because that is prudent. We cannot play with the finances of Barbados. We cannot play with our financial institutions. We cannot play, sir, with the Central Bank of Barbados. Everything is now starting to click once again. People have faith that what should be done is being done, and that is being done in the best interest of Barbados. So, sir, as I said, we should not have had to come here, but maybe it was necessary. But what this does is say that the anomaly that happened before, the aberration that happened before, the wrongdoing that happened before, the perceptions that we suffered from before must never be allowed once again to stain the image of the Central Bank of Barbados or the institution, sir, of the governor or the deputy governor. So this now makes it clear to all that the deputy governor is supposed to know what is going on. He's supposed to be party to the information. He's supposed to be able to do his job when called upon, because he has everything at his disposal that the principal, that the actual substantive governor has to enable him to make the decisions that are in the best interest of the central bank and of the economy of Barbados. So I hope that has clarified it for everybody who's listening, sir. And having made that clarification, I can end exactly as I started and say I completely and totally support this amendment. Thank you, sir.
Honourable Member for Christchurch East Central.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and I want to thank the honourable member for his contribution, because things that make sense we should adopt and make sure happens as routine. But in life, sir, as you know, sometimes you have to codify that which you would expect people to do, and therefore these amendments we feel will be able to help us to ensure that the things that make good sense, sir, is now the law effectively, and therefore by right one cannot be excluded obviously from the normal operation. Let me thank the honourable member for that specific contribution, because I believe that Barbadians would appreciate that good old Bajan common sense, as we say, sir, must always apply, and therefore we want to ensure that that happens moving forward. The reality is, sir, is that there's more work to be done to obviously ensure that as we rebuild critical institutions, that we need to strengthen not just issues within the central bank, as this bill addresses, but right across the public sector, sir, the private sector, and the like, sir, to ensure that Barbados is at its strongest. And therefore, this, we believe, is part of how we respond to the urgency of now. And therefore, we want to assure Barbadians that this is the path that we must remain on, but we don't stay on the path because we want to stay on the path, so we've got to do it with pace to ensure that the effects are felt sooner rather than later of any decisions that are taken, positively or negatively, sir, because they're always positive and negative effects. But the sooner we can get these things done, it means then, sir, that other opportunities can avail themselves to Barbadians, and therefore we want to respond quickly such that we can open up opportunities for growth in the economy. And so, sir, with those few words, I beg to move that this bill be read a second time.
Second.
Question is that the aforementioned bill be read a second time. All those honourable members in favour, please say aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it.
I beg to move that you do not leave the chair and the House resolve itself into committee for further consideration of this bill.
Second.
The question is that the Speaker do not leave the chair and the House resolve itself in the committee for further consideration of this bill. All those honourable members in favour, please say aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it.
This Honourable House is now in committee.
Mr. Chairman, Permission to call the clauses in two sets, please. Clauses 1 through 8.
Chair, I beg to move that clause 1 to 8 stand part.
The question is that clauses 1 to 8 stand part. All honorable members in favor, say aye. Honorable members against, say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Clauses 9 through 16.
Chair, I beg to move that clause 9 to 16 stand part.
The question is that clauses 9 to 16 stand part. All honorable members in favor, say aye. Honorable members against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Schedule.
Mea culpa.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that the schedule be the schedule to the bill.
The question is that the schedule be the schedule to the bill. All honorable members in favor, say aye. Honorable members against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that you do not report to His Honor the Speaker in the passing of one bill in committee.
The question is that I do not report to His Honor the Speaker the passing of one bill in committee. All honorable members in favor, say aye. Honorable members against, say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
The chairman has reported the passing of one bill in committee.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that this bill be read a third time.
Question is that the bill be read a third time. All those honorable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that this bill be now passed and cited as the Central Bank of Barbados Amendment Act 2023.
The question is that the aforementioned bill be passed and so cited. All those honorable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it. This bill is passed and so cited. Honorable member.
Mr. Speaker, with that, we've now come to the end of proceedings for the day. I beg to move that this Honourable House do stand adjourned until Tuesday, the 18th day of July at 10 in the forenoon.
The question is that this honorable House be adjourned until Tuesday, the 18th day of July 2023
Nice, man.
at 10 a.m. in the forenoon. All those honorable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
All right, I can start you with that thing, yeah?
Prior to the adjournment, I wish the chairman of committees a most prosperous birthday and may he enjoy it to the max. This honorable chamber stands adjourned until Tuesday, the 18th day of July at 10 a.m. in the forenoon.